Just out of curiosity, and I ask this question a lot to people that I meet and the topic comes up. I don't know if I'm on over here. Show of hands. How many of you in here have never had to move? You've been in the same house. I know why you're laughing. You've been in the same house all your life. Never moved. Really? When I'm thinking about what I want to speak about, usually what's in my mind are the things that are going on in my life. And the thing that is going on in me and Betsy's life right now is houses. For a variety of reasons, we are trying to sell our house and find another house. So we've had it on the market for a while now. And this kind of got me thinking about all of the different places that I have lived, all of the different homes that I've occupied. And I've got to tell you, I'm glad that I'm in relatively good company here, because all of you, with the exception of one person, has had to move before. Some more than others. I grew up as a, as you know, missionary kid and a preacher's kid. So Dad was on the move. Did I say military kid? Missionary. Okay. Missionary kid. Those of you that have been in the military, obviously you've moved around too. Okay, so you're probably wondering why there's a tree house up behind me. This is my first home. I'm not kidding. It's, you know, when people say raised, I was raised in a barn, or you know, some of that I can actually say is true. But this one here, this is not an actual picture of my first house. It's a tree house, and it's not my actual tree house, but it is the closest picture that I could find of what my first tree house looked like. So let me tell you about this very special place. Me and my brother pestered my dad until he finally relented and built us a tree house in Gambia, West Africa. Now this is not a mango tree, but the tree that our first tree house was in was a huge mango tree. And this was a very, very special place for me because it was a refuge. It was a place that I could go and get away from everything except my big brother, who was usually up there with me, until we found out that he was highly allergic to mangoes. Then that place got a whole lot better. This tree house was, I'm giggling here because, as you know, I was a safety manager for several years, and I have to laugh at some of the things that my dad did. I went out and saw Chris Willis's tree house that he built, and it's up to par. I mean, it meets all the safety standards. Dad, he didn't know, that much about safety, so rather than putting an actual, and this picture has, you can see the pieces of wood that have been, we didn't have anything like that. Rather, we had a 20-foot rope ladder that was out away about 3 feet from the actual platform that you would climb up onto. And the bottom of this rope ladder was not secured to anything. So climbing this rope ladder was not for the faint of heart. It took a lot of courage. It took a lot of dedication, strength. And once you got up to where you wanted to step off of the rope ladder onto the platform, it became even more of a challenge because, the rope is swinging back and forth and you're trying to grab the platform and you're 20 feet up in the ground. My brother, as you know, I've followed his example in certain things, jumping across sewage ditches, which I landed in. This particular tree house, my brother was able to climb this thing up. And when he got towards the top of this rope ladder, he let his feet just go loose. So he was able to hoist himself up onto that final few rungs and then onto the platform just by the strength of his hands. And I got to tell you, I remember that vividly, and I thought that that was the neatest, coolest thing I had ever seen done in my entire life. So like a lot of stupid things he did, I wanted to mimic him. And I just wasn't quite brave enough to pull this off until Susan McKinney was standing there, 5-year-old, blonde hair, blue eyes. Sorry, Betsy, she was my first love. And so she's standing there watching me climb this rope ladder. And that was the day that I decided I'm going to impress Susan McKinney. So I let my feet off the ladder, and I was 3 rungs up from the top. And I thought to myself, I can do this. So I reached up and I grabbed that next one, and my hands were just sweating, and my arms began to shake. And I reached for that next one and just barely got it. And it was about that point that I realized, oh no, I have made a big mistake. And so I tried to find my feet again and get them back in that rope swing. But that rope swing is going everywhere now. And the more I struggled against it, the more that thing started swinging all over the place. And my hands gave way. And I really don't know why I'm here today standing in front of you, because by all accounts, that was up there. I mean, 20 feet up in the air. And I fell backwards, and I remember flipping completely over and landing on the ground. And I had never in my life had the breath knocked out of me. That was the first time. And so I couldn't catch my breath. And I knew that something was wrong with my ribs. And my chin had come down, and I felt something loose hanging around my chin area. And the tip of my tongue wasn't where it was supposed to be. And I remember little Susan McKinney saying, "You okay?" And I had to tell Susan McKinney, go get help. Because I thought I was dying, because I wasn't able to get off. Just no air was coming in. Consequences of doing things you shouldn't do. That's my first house that I want to tell you about. We'll come back to it in a minute. I got to tell you, I probably should have called Chris Willis or Tim. It took me hours and hours to try to get this picture, because I had to go to Google Earth, which is, by the way, a very neat thing. And so I was able to find, this is the actual house I lived in when I got back from Africa. This is on Sutherland Drive in Warren, Michigan. Does this thing have a laser? So this is the garage here, and this is the side of the house. The front is actually right here. And I don't know if you can see this fence line, but this was the neighbor's house, and this fence line ran all the way back down here, and then all the way down here was Briarwood Elementary, which is where I went to school. And believe it or not, back in this day and age, Mom and Dad let me walk back and forth to school in Michigan, Detroit, suburb of Detroit, by myself. So I was a young lad back from Africa, and the only people that I associated with or knew or was used to seeing were black kids, African American kids. Besides my parents, we were the only white folks there. So at this house and at that school, this is where I learned about a word called prejudice. Because guess who I made friends with? My first friends, the folks I felt comfortable with, were the other black kids at school. And so I quickly learned that that just wasn't really acceptable. And so there was this particular beefy kid who really had a problem with me. And every day after school, he would chase after me and catch me and beat me senseless. I mean, he delivered a whooping on me like I had never had in my life. Now, me and my brother fought, but there was always a limit where my brother would go. He would stop at a certain point. This kid, he would take the back of my head and hit it up against the concrete. It was horrible. And I got beat up day after day after day. This kid was a real bully. He beat me up for one reason. I was friends with some other black kids. And so that was a learning process. Now, here's what I discovered. If I made it to right here, if I ran fast enough where I was in sight of my house and my home, he gave up. He stopped chasing. So I quickly learned that the only thing that I really had to do was get to that point and be faster than him. Now, there were days when I would take off running, and I knew that he was behind me. And I would sometimes make the mistake of looking back. And sometimes I tripped and fell, and he would catch me. Sometimes just looking back and getting distracted would cause me to slow down. He would catch me. But I knew once I got there, I was safe and secure because that was my sanctuary. That was home. Mom and Dad were there, and I had made it safe. And the feeling that would wash over me. And keep in mind, I mean, as a kid, you know, those bullies are terrifying. And I can remember that sense of just, I made it. I made it. It was overwhelming. That was my second one. Third home. Y'all remember the first house you ever bought as an adult? Your first house. Stand out in your memory, your mind. Me and Betsy were newly married, and this was in Ringgold, Georgia, 214 High Street. This was our first home. I learned a whole lot, and it's not much, it's a small home, but I've got to tell you, I was proud of this house. I mean, just proud as could be. I learned a lot of things in this home. I learned what it means to be a homeowner. I learned that things go wrong all the time. Things are breaking. But I also learned in this home that I had some talents. I had the talent to do things, to fix that house up. I learned about plumbing. I learned about electricity the hard way. I don't do electricity anymore at all. I learned about laying floors, tile and wood. I learned about doing trim work. And I'm pretty good at some of that stuff. I had a talent for it. And so the pride in this home, as I put sweat, blood, time, energy, and effort into it, that pride grew. And I was just so proud of what we were able to do with this little tiny home. Didn't look like much on the outside, but you walked in, it was pretty nice. Fourth house. And that is not my house. Mom and Dad bought this home. They had it built, and all of the kids came and helped a whole lot. And years and years and years of sacrifice living in, well, you saw some of the small homes at home. And they finally were able to build their dream home. And to me, this house represents a culmination of all of the homes where Mom and Dad were. Now, I realize that there's those that may be here today that were not as fortunate as I was to have a great Mom and Dad. I mean, God-fearing, they raised us right, they were there for us, they were loving, they were supportive, and I weep for those people that did not get that. Every kid deserves that kind of home. And as good as this home looks on the outside, I wish I could bring every one of them into the inside. Because there is this love, just a tremendous amount of comfort and warmth. And I can't really find the words to describe how that makes me feel now, to know that I had those kind of parents. And no matter where the house was, it was a home. Real treasure. And if I could say that there was a paradise on earth, it would be wherever Mom and Dad and our family were, because it was absolutely magnificent. You know, there were hard times. There were tough times. I went in the kitchen. But Mom and Dad made it special. They made a house a home. That's a fourth house. This next picture I'm going to show you is very subjective. Does anybody know where I'm going with this last house? You know, I try to picture what heaven might be like. And everybody's got their own idea of what it's going to be like to go home. The final home. To me, I love this picture. That doesn't even begin to show what heaven's going to be like. But I'm thinking about all of these other homes, and I'm thinking about the analogy that I want to now make to you. If you've got your Bibles, we're going to go back and revisit some of these very briefly, and then I'm going to offer an invitation. First one I would like for you to look at is found in Philippians chapter 3. I'll give you a few moments to get there. Philippians chapter 3. And while you're turning there, what I want you to do is go back to this one. Starting in verse 13. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. That rope ladder, as an adult now looking back at that, the analogy that I can make represents life. You keep climbing. Stay focused. You don't look back. You don't look down. Because let me tell you, life can be tough. And we know that Satan is prowling around like a roaring lion, looking to whom he can devour and eat. And when we get distracted, life begins to shake and swing back and forth and go all over the place on us. And we can lose our grip and fall. And when we fall, the consequences can be bad. Turn to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12, and we're going to look at verses 1 and 2. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight, and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. I look back a lot of times, running to get home, and the bully caught me. And I suffered because of it. But you know what? The times that I didn't look back, that I stayed laser beam focused on that house, and I ran for all I was worth. I beat that bully. He did not catch me. I won. And And the joy that I felt as I reached that point was overwhelming. Joy and safety and security. Look at Matthew chapter 25. I'm not going to read all of this, but you know the story. This is Jesus instructing about the talents. And it begins in verse 14 of chapter 25 in Matthew. For the kingdom of heaven is a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to the other 2, and to the other 1, to every man according to his several abilities. And you know what happened there. The man given the 1 talent, it wasn't a lot, but he had a talent. And what did he do with it? Buried it. He didn't use it. Shame on me if I were to buy a house and take pride in it and lay back and let it fall apart. Shame on me. I had abilities. I put those abilities to use. And it became something worth something. I added value. There we go. I added value to this little home. John 14. We had it read to us. I'd like for you to turn back to that.